The minor 2-5-1 progression is a very important and very common progression to come across in jazz harmony, but it's a little bit more difficult to improvise over than its major counterpart, and that's because the half diminished 2 chord is maybe a little bit tricky to work with, and also because you need a few more scales to just get through the basic progression. In this video I'm going to go over 5 examples of lines that are over this progression, and I'm going to use those to show you which scales I'm using, and also some of the arpeggios and some of the other ideas behind the melodies that I'm making, so that it gets easier for you to make your own lines. My name is Jens Larsen. If you want to learn more about jazz guitar and use that to make music, then subscribe to my channel. If you want to make sure not to miss anything, then click the little bell notification icon next to the subscribe button. The examples that I'm using in this video are all on a minor 2-5-1 in the key of C minor. So that means that it's D half diminished to G7 to C minor 6. This first example is really using some of the basic arpeggios that are extremely practical to have in your repertoire and your vocabulary if you want to improvise over this progression. The first one is really just coming out of the basic arpeggio of the chord, so the D half diminished arpeggio. And I'm playing a short melody with it, so it's not only just running up and down the arpeggio, because I'm going from the A flat back down to the F. And then from the C that I end on here, I'm just running down chromatically, so to the A flat on the G7. So on the G7, the line I'm playing here, you can probably best interpret that as being from C harmonic minor. Of course, G7 is the dominant in C, so it's the C harmonic minor scale that we're using. And I'm using that scale with an added B flat, as you can see in the line. And the way that I'm constructing the line is that's really using one arpeggio as a blueprint, and that's, if we look at the G7, flat 9, flat 13 like this, then the top part of that is an F half diminished arpeggio chord, and then I'm using that as an arpeggio, so F half diminished. And that's sort of the skeleton of what I'm doing. So I'm coming out of the A flat, skipping down to the F, adding the G here, and then playing the rest of the arpeggio, and then going up to another A flat, adding the B flat, and then resolving to the G on the C minor 6. The 2 arpeggios that I'm using in this example are definitely also something you want to have in your vocabulary, because they are great to really spell out the changes. And what I'm doing is that I'm just using some of the other arpeggios that are found in the scale, so I don't always have to use the basic arpeggio of the chord. So the first one is on the D half diminished, and here I'm using the arpeggio from the 5th, so the flat 5 in this case, that's an A flat, and D half diminished is of course found in C minor, and here on the A flat we have an A flat major 7 arpeggio. And I'm playing it just to change up the rhythm a little bit. I'm playing that as a triplet, so I'm adding a leading note, and then playing the triplet, taking me up to the 7th, and then from here I'm actually going up to the 9th, and then using that to just add a quick turn back down to the G, adding a leading note, and then coming out on the F on G7. And here I'm already starting with the arpeggio that I'm using on the G7, and that's the arpeggio from the 3rd, that's the B diminished arpeggio. And I'm using it, I mean, you can invert the diminished arpeggio and it's gonna be just other diminished arpeggios. So I'm starting on the F and then playing a diminished arpeggio as a descending melody, and then adding a trill on the B flat and the B, down to the A flat, F, and then resolving on the 5th of C minor. Another very practical structure to start working with if you're looking for material to improvise over a chord is to check out some Coltrane patterns and then find some that fits the chord. In this case, I'm using an F minor Coltrane pattern on the D half diminished. So of course the upper part of a D half diminished chord is in fact an F minor triad. And here I'm using the F minor Coltrane pattern, so that's F, A flat, B flat and C. And I'm just using those 4 notes to create a melody, and that becomes this melody. So it's a very simple way to just work with something that actually fits the chord really well and also is easy to make some nice melodies with. Then I'm going to the G7, and that's really clearly stated by going to the B here. And here I'm again using a B diminished arpeggio in inversion. So from the high B here I'm skipping down to D and then up the arpeggio. And then the next part of the line is a triad, a diatonic triad, because I'm playing this melody, and that's an augmented triad. The augmented triad, so of course on G7 I'm using C harmonic minor, and the augmented triad that's in that scale is found on the third of the chord, so that's an E flat augmented. An augmented triad is also symmetrical, so that means that if you start making inversions, you get the same triad all the time. So an E flat augmented triad is also a G augmented and a B augmented triad. So you could maybe also just call this a G augmented triad. And then I'm resolving that to the ninth of the C minor 6. The reason that I can keep on publishing videos every week is that there is a community of people over on Patreon that are supporting the channel. I'm very grateful for their support, and it's because of them that I can keep on making all these videos on jazz guitar and music theory. If you want to help me keep making videos, then check out my Patreon page. And if you join us over on Patreon, then I can also give you something in return for your support. Whenever you're checking out new material for progression, like we're doing in this video, then it is also really important that you start to look at, well, how can I combine these different things? Because it is not enough to just only have one basic little 4-note pattern. You also want to see if you can fit it together with other things. And that's what I'm doing here in this example. So the first part of it is again using the arpeggio from the flat 5 of the D, so the A flat major 7 arpeggio, just playing the low version here. And then I'm combining that with the F Coltrane pattern, and then from here it goes to G7, again clearly marking the G7 with the B, so that's really a very clear note that we're on the G7. A short scale melody from the harmonic minor scale, and then what is essentially just a melody coming out of a G7 arpeggio. Because of course, even though it's a G7 with a flat 9 and a flat 13, you can still make some great melodies just using the basic arpeggio, and it's important that you also have that as part of your tool set when you're improvising over a minor 2-5-1. Another arpeggio or chord voicing that's really useful for the half diminished, and actually also if you're playing an alto dominant, even though that's not how I'm using it in this example, is what is sometimes referred to as the magic chord. So the idea is that for a D half diminished, you can use the chord voicing from the flat 5 again. So in this case that's an A flat major 7, but then with a flat 5, so A flat C and then a D and a G. And that works really well both as a chord voicing, so you can use this for D half diminished, but you can also use that in a solo line, and that's what I'm doing in the example. So I'm starting on the D, and then I'm playing the A flat major 7 flat 5 magic chord arpeggio. Then with a few 16 notes just running down the scale, coming out on the third of the G7, so here, and then first a melody using the basic G7 arpeggio, which is also just a nice way to create a few larger intervals where we're using arpeggios just to break up all the scale melodies that we're using, so we don't always play the same kind of movement, and that is really going to make the melody a lot more interesting. And that's also what I'm really doing here by just playing the basic first inversion G triad and then adding that F so that we have a G7. Then I'm using another augmented triad and then down the scale resolving to the third of C minor 6. If you want to check out some more ideas on how you can add more of the triplets and chromatic leading notes and really the bebop language to your playing, then check out this video where I'm talking about how to study bebop vocabulary. If you want to learn more about jazz guitar and it's the first time you see one of my videos, then subscribe to my channel. If you want to help me keep making videos, then check out my Patreon page. That's about it for this time. Thank you for watching, and until next time.